I'll never forget the first time I met my husband's family. David and I had been dating for about a year, and he decided it was time for me to meet everyone. I was nervous, of course, but I dressed nicely, brought a bottle of wine, and tried to come with an open heart. His parents were polite enough, maybe a little reserved, but the moment I walked into the living room and met his sister-in-law, Melissa, I knew things were going to be complicated. She didn't even try to hide her look of judgment. Her eyes went straight to my shoes, my bag, and then to David, like she was mentally calculating how much money he spent on me. She barely smiled when we shook hands. "So, what do you do?" she asked, but not in a curious way, more like she already assumed I didn't have a real job. "I'm a freelance interior designer," I said. "I work with small homes and Airbnb spaces mostly." She raised her eyebrows and smirked. "Oh, cute. So you decorate things?" I laughed politely and said, "Well, there's more to it than that, but yes, design is a big part." The rest of the night she kept throwing little comments, subtle jabs, like, "It must be nice not to have to worry about rent when you're dating someone in tech," or, "Some girls really know how to land on their feet." I tried not to let it get to me, but I felt small, like I didn't belong. And the worst part? David didn't say anything. He just smiled awkwardly and changed the subject every time she said something shady. That night, driving home, I didn't say much, but in my gut I knew this wouldn't be the last time Melissa made me feel like an outsider. A few months after that awkward dinner, David's parents invited us to a big family BBQ at their house in Phoenix. It was one of those events where everyone showed up. Cousins, uncles, kids running around the backyard, the smell of grilled burgers in the air. I honestly tried to be positive about it. I even baked cookies to bring along. But the second we got there, I felt Melissa's eyes on me. She gave me that same once-over, top to bottom, then leaned in and whispered something to her husband. He glanced at me and laughed. Whatever it wasn't kind. During dinner, we were all gathered around the picnic tables. I was sitting between David and his aunt when Melissa raised her voice just enough to make sure everyone heard. "You know, it's crazy how some women just magically end up with guys in tech. I mean, no offense, Amanda, but you really lucked out." The table went silent. I looked at David, hoping he would say something. But he just shifted uncomfortably and sipped his drink. I smiled tightly and replied, "I guess we're both lucky then. He found someone who believes in him." Melissa laughed, that sharp kind of laugh that makes your skin crawl. "Sure, babe, or maybe he found someone who believes in his paycheck." People laughed. Not all of them, but enough. I felt my face burn. I wanted to disappear. That night in the car, I finally said something to David. I asked him why he didn't defend me. He said, "It's just Melissa. That's how she is. Don't take it personally." But how could I not? His silence hurt more than her words. After that barbecue, I stopped going to most family events. I didn't want to keep putting myself in places where I felt so small. David said he understood, but I could tell it annoyed him. He hated conflict, especially within his family. Meanwhile, our marriage started showing cracks. Not dramatic ones, just small, quiet distances that grew over time. We still said "I love you," still watched Netflix on the couch. But there was a space between us I couldn't seem to close. Maybe it was because I started focusing more on my work. After all the snide comments about not having a real job, I threw myself into growing my design business. I took on cheap, difficult projects no one else wanted. Tiny studio apartments, run-down Airbnb units, and made them beautiful on a shoestring budget. I learned to paint, tile, even install light fixtures myself. I worked 12-hour days, skipped weekends, and poured every cent I made into tools, materials, and marketing. I barely had time to socialize, let alone visit people who judged me. No one saw the grind. Melissa certainly didn't. I'm sure if you asked her back then, she still thought I was spending David's money getting manicures and brunching with girlfriends all day. But in reality, I was building something. Quietly. On my own. And even when David didn't fully understand what I was trying to do, I kept going. Because deep down, I knew I needed to be able to stand on my own 2 feet, no matter what happened next. I always thought if my marriage ended, it would be because of some giant fight, some betrayal that shattered everything. But when it finally happened, it came like a slow leak. Quiet, steady, and impossible to ignore. David started coming home later. He was distant, distracted. He stopped asking about my day, and I stopped offering. One night, I found a message on his phone from a coworker, someone I'd never heard of before, but apparently she knew a lot about our marriage. When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it. He just said, "I didn't mean for it to happen." That was it. No begging, no apology, just a shrug and silence. I moved out 2 weeks later. I didn't ask for alimony. I didn't want his money. I just wanted peace. I took what little savings I had and moved into a tiny fixer-upper on the edge of Tucson that I'd bought a year earlier as a side investment. It was supposed to be a rental project, but now it became my lifeline. I lived among dust and paint cans, sleeping on a mattress on the floor while I slowly repaired it room by room. I cried at night, but every morning I picked up the hammer again. My business became my anchor. I kept working, kept pushing, kept building. Everyone thought I'd fall apart. Melissa probably expected me to run back home or chase David for support. But I didn't. I rebuilt myself from the ground up, literally. And for the first time in years, I started to feel free. The first year after the divorce was the hardest, but it was also the most transformative. I took every job I could get, budget makeovers, last-minute rentals, even helping landlords stage properties for sale. I worked with my hands until they were blistered and bruised. I filmed my projects, posted them online, and slowly started getting attention from local clients. One video went semi-viral in a Facebook real estate group. After that, inquiries started coming in from homeowners wanting affordable, creative renovations. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something with real momentum. With the money I earned, I bought a second, run-down house at auction. It was a mess. Bad plumbing, holes in the walls, no working kitchen. But I saw potential. I renovated it room by room, documenting everything. When it was done, I rented it out to a traveling nurse for twice what I expected. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just patching my life back together. I was creating a future on my own terms. I stayed frugal. I didn't buy fancy clothes or eat out much. Every extra dollar went back into my projects. My circle got smaller, but it also got better. Real friends showed up. The fake ones faded out. I didn't post pictures of my new life. I didn't flaunt success. I didn't need to. Because for the first time, I felt something stronger than pride. I felt peace. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I got the email. I was reviewing paint samples for a new project when my phone buzzed. Subject line: rental inquiry, urgent. The message was short and panicked. Someone named Melissa Chambers was desperately looking for a rental. She'd seen one of my listings. A fully renovated 2-bedroom I had just put on the market in Midtown Tucson. Said she needed something ASAP. Recently separated, credit score shaky, willing to pay 3 months up front. My stomach dropped. Melissa, my former sister-in-law. I read the message 3 times, just to be sure. Same last name. Same tone I remembered. Demanding, a little entitled, but this time with a hint of desperation. I didn't respond right away. I sat there, letting it sink in. So many emotions hit me all at once. Disbelief, curiosity, and if I'm being honest, a flicker of satisfaction. She didn't know the property belonged to me. The listing had gone up under my business name. I'd learned the hard way to keep my face out of things. I debated whether to respond at all, but eventually I wrote back in my usual professional tone. Hi Melissa, thank you for your interest. We can schedule a showing later this week. Please bring any documentation you have regarding income or references. She replied within 5 minutes. Thank you. You have no idea how much this means to me. It's been a tough year. Yeah, I bet. And just like that, we set a time for her to come see the place. The day of the showing, I got there early. I opened all the windows to let the light in, lit a candle in the kitchen, and made sure everything looked perfect. Not because I wanted to impress her, but because I'd worked hard for this. This house was a symbol of every step I took after my life fell apart. Melissa showed up right on time, wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying a designer handbag that looked a few seasons old. She looked tired. Not physically, but the kind of tired that lives in your spirit. She didn't recognize me at first. I greeted her with a polite smile and a clipboard in hand. Hi, Melissa. I'm Amanda, the property owner. Her eyes froze. She stared at me for a solid 5 seconds, like her brain couldn't catch up to what her eyes were seeing. You, she said, almost in a whisper. Yes, I replied calmly. This property belongs to me. The silence was thick. You could hear the ceiling fan hum. Mm-hmm. She blinked a few times. I didn't know. I didn't realize. I know. She looked down, suddenly quiet. All the sharp edges she used to throw at me? Gone, replaced with something I never thought I'd see from her. Humility. I didn't mean what I said back then, she muttered. I gave a small nod. Doesn't really matter now. I walked her through the unit like I would with any other tenant, explained the appliances, the lease terms, the security deposit. I didn't gloat, I didn't bring up the past. I didn't need to. The house said everything for me. Melissa ended up signing the lease. She didn't ask for special treatment, and I didn't offer any. I treated her like I would any other tenant. With respect, clear boundaries, and firm professionalism. She paid the deposit, moved in a week later, and I handed her the keys without saying much more than, "Take care of the place." She nodded and murmured, "I will." Since then, she's kept to herself, quiet, responsible. I think life humbled her in ways words never could. A few months ago, I saw her sitting outside on the porch, reading a book. We locked eyes for a second. She gave me a small nod. It wasn't apology. It wasn't regret. It was something more grounded. Maybe understanding. Maybe acceptance. And I nodded back. I don't know what Melissa says about me now, or if she ever admits what she used to think. It doesn't really matter. What matters is, I didn't need to scream, prove, or fight to win. I just kept walking, kept building, kept choosing dignity. Because in the end, the best kind of power isn't being above someone else. It's rising so steadily that the people who tried to bury you eventually live in the house you built.